sermon title today, a quote from the translation of this text in the Good News Bible. He prepares me for war. I think the New Revised Standard Version that Rich read says he trains my hands for war. During my recent visit to my country of origin, the one purpose was to place my father's ashes first in the wall in a church in Swellendam, which is a beautiful town about 200 miles or 200 kilometers, let's say 150 miles northeast of Cape Town, where my mother currently lives with my sister. And 5 of us, the family members, placed the ashes in the memorial wall there at the church where my brother-in-law is the minister. And then I proceeded with MJ North to Johannesburg and Pretoria area, about 1,500 miles north of Cape Town. And the first stop after the airport, after my brother picked us up, was a place that we call or refer to in Afrikaans as Monumentkopje, Monument Hill. It is on the southern outskirts of Pretoria, quite a prominent landmark. And it is probably the closest that one would come to sacred ground, holy ground for the Afrikaner nation. It is a monument that was erected, quite an imposing structure that dominates the landscape. It was erected to commemorate the voortrekkers that trekked inland from the Cape to the north and to the east coast of South Africa. Part of the function of that monument there is to create a spot where the cultural goods, the artifacts that are of significance for the Afrikaner nation can find a home. And one finds a number of memorial walls there as well. Memorial walls that, similar to American memorial walls for wars and people that died in the wars, where their names are engraved in black granite or marble in some instances. Quite an impressive number of walls there for different categories of people. And there is also a memorial wall for ashes to be placed, where my parents requested that after my mother also passed away, that their ashes be placed. So my brother and I and my sister went to have a look at the memorial plaque for them and to see where the ashes will be placed. But while I was waiting for my sister to arrive, I walked around on the premises, and I haven't been there for about 40 years. So I looked around and I looked at the memorial wall there. The names of people since World War I on this wall. And I encountered about 30 people that I buried and that I served with, that I knew well. And others that I'm aware of that died in wars after I left the service. And looking at the names and standing there in the bright African sun, much brighter than this. It was time when memories flooded back, recalling some of the instances and the circumstances around the names that I saw on the wall, reliving some of the experiences and also thinking about what they died for, why, people from all over Africa that the unit that I served in was composed of. South of the Sahara, almost every country represented there. And it made me think a lot about war in general, memorial walls, and also the wars of my adopted nation, America. It made me think of the names on the wall, but also the names not appearing on the wall yet. The names of those that bear the scars of war, in whose memories were seared, or into whose memories was seared the horror that they were confronted with. Things that they were called on to do in the name of duty, and things that were done to them also in the name of duty. It made me think of the people who silently bear the scars of such things and who find it difficult to live a normal life in society. And I can relate to that, remembering that in between deployments, when I had a layover in, let's say, in Pretoria for a few days, I would sit in a cafe and look around me and feel so totally disassociated from everything going on around me, as if it was something or everything that was not worthwhile being engaged in, living in a different universe and just wanting to go back to where I came from. And I think of many people walking around like that after being exposed to terrible things, having now to slot in and live a normal life. And I also think of both people whose names appear there and those whose names are not there, and their family members, and the web of relationships that they are part of, what they still have to go through. And some that I know of that I served with, and one that I even visited, that are living on the street. Some that are living in abject poverty with no prospect of a more or less normal future. It was easy for me to relate to that because I was intimately part of the processes that lead to the names on the wall. But I can also relate to people in this nation, so many of them. And I think we are privileged that we are not exposed so much in this community to war and the effects of war. I was wondering how many veterans we have here. I know Stuart Morrell. Stu and I have exchanged war stories when I visit with him. It always gets too long a visit, to be too long a visit. Are there any other veterans, people that have served? Dwayne. Is that the total? So yes, I think we are fortunate that we're not so much exposed to that. Because the longer I live and the more I look at the phenomenon of war and the result of war, the sanitizing erection of walls, the building of walls, to gloss over the horror of war. You give somebody a nice plaque or a nice name or a nice ribbon. The longer I live, the more I wonder about humanity, and I wonder about power, and if we are really should be allowed to have any power as human beings to make decisions that affect so many lives, both on our side and on the opposing side, where people are thrown into horrible situations and they have to kill each other. These days we kill mostly at a longer distance, and we work with video screens where it's almost like a video game. But I think the motives stay the same, and the application of the behavioral patterns throughout human history stays the same. It was always in South Africa and in this nation as well. It is interesting for me to analyze and to look at war talk. Those who have never been involved in war, those who know they won't be exposed to the horrors of war, or their children, or their friends children, those who have the power to see that they are kept from war, those are the people who easily talk about war. Those are the people who like to push the buttons to unleash the horrors of modern weaponry. And I also marvel at myself and what I observe when we have almost a reality TV show about war. How excited we get, for instance, when Moab is used, that the biggest conventional explosive bomb. All TV networks rave about that. The ratings go through the roof when the Tomahawk missiles are unleashed. There is a macabre embracing of that. But we are not exposed to what happens on the ground. That part is sanitized. We don't see it. And even when we get a distant view into it, there is ample warning. Please hide the children. Please steel yourself. There will be some horrific scenes. And we get a little glimpse of not the most horrific stuff. The doctors who have to try and patch up people, scrape a body together, let it breathe, they are the ones that see what's really happening. And the ones living through it, due to increased and improved medical technology, walk around often experiencing the aversion people feel to them due to their injuries. And there is no memorial wall or no ribbon that can compensate for living in that hell and with that hell for the rest of your life. It has been human nature to rally the troops for battle through some noble cause, for the fatherland, for the homeland, and sometimes for a sacred cause as well, invoking God's approval and God's sanction and God's support for going into battle. I myself read Psalm 144, the first few verses, before going into battle. I read it to troops. And the version I read said, He trains my hands for battle and teaches me to make war. To tell the troops, you are going into battle, but you're not alone. God is with you, and what you are doing is not an abhorrent thing. Here we read in the Bible, God's word, God prepares people for wars and He trains them. I did not, I think, said that they have a just cause, and put a holy sauce over the mess of war. But in this sanctification of war, we find this example in Psalm 144 as well. This is an ancient psalm, probably from the time of the kings of Judah. And it was most probably used as a standard piece of liturgy for a service. And the service was the special occasion, normally, of the enthronement of a new king. Then they would read this and go through this liturgy with choruses, etc., at specific times. But it was a huge celebration. This is the enthronement of the new king of Israel, God's direct appointment, God's person to lead Israel in all senses, and also into battle. And this is the celebration of the king. God appointed me. God will lead me into battle. God will train my people to fight the proper fight. This psalm also in the Hebrew contains fairly recent, in the context of biblical Hebrew, fairly recent grammatical forms that gives an indication to us that this was used over a very long period of time, in an ancient origin in Hebrew, but used over many generations. And it reflects for me the acceptance of normal that there will be wars, that the king of Israel will celebrate as soon as there is a new king, that he is the appointment of God, or appointed by God, to lead Israel into the next battle. An acceptance of the normalcy of battle and the normalcy of invoking God to go into battle and saying God is with us. We're not alone. God is calling on us to do this thing. You know, when we sell battle to people, it reminds me of and I think you know the story. It's a story about political campaigns. When a guy dies, and it unfolds a bit different than from what he was taught. He sees Peter and he sees the devil. Let's call him Nick. And each one is trying to do a sales job on him, on where to go. So the devil, or Peter is first, and he takes this guy around through heaven. You know, people floating on the clouds in white, nice robes, playing the harp, singing constantly. Happy scene, pastoral scene. And then it's Nick's turn. And he takes this guy to places like, you know, the Sandals Club of the Caribbean, where there's drinks on the house, everything is included, beautiful women, bikini clad all the time. And you don't need expensive surgery these days to look good. You can just Photoshop the images. And the guy obviously says, yes, that's where I want to go. So he goes and descends to hell, and it is really hell. Smell of sulfur, fires everywhere, people being tortured constantly. And he said, but what's this? This is not what I signed up for. And Nick looks at him and said, hey, that was campaign talk. This is reality. And I think, in a sense, we do the same with war. We glorify it and we muster the motives to enter into it. And I think for us as Christians, living in this day and age, for us as Americans, especially with a leading role in the world, I think it is time for us to properly honor those that were killed. those whose names appear on the memorial walls. But it is also time for us to pause and think of those whose names are not there yet, who are still living in that hell that they were exposed to, whose minds have been twisted, in some cases destroyed, and people who inhabit a shell of their former self, people who do not want to live, and people who live under the bridges, who are homeless. And I've seen so many of them in places where there are big military bases. I think it is time for us especially to think again and work sparingly and to avoid absolutely the sanctification of war and the invoking of the love of God to enter into wars. There's a lot of talk of holy war, and the response to that is also normally holy war, which is, I think, a contradiction in terms. If we want to proceed into the future as God's people, I think it is our responsibility to walk with determination, with the utmost care, so that every memorial wall will be a line in the sand that says enough. Enough of this killing in the name of whoever and whatever. That every memorial wall will be a monument to the past collective stupidity of humanity, and a monument to hope for the future. That we will say enough of this killing, enough of, for some reason, accepting that there will be wars, as if we are incapable of evolving to the next step in our journey as Homo sapiens, as wise beings, and to leave behind the ways of Homo horribilis, the horrible human being that can conjure up motives and reasons to engage in war. Let us leave that behind and lead as people that say, while realizing the complexity of the reality that we live in, that we cannot let evil go unopposed, but work with a firm commitment to create a different way of being and to stand up for that and say we honor those who gave their lives, but exactly because they gave their lives, we want to prevent others from having the necessity to do that. Let that be how we look at Memorial Day. With sadness about humanity's past, looking at with apprehension at the present, but also determined to journey together and to take hands so that we can look and our descendants and all life on this planet can look towards the future. That is the future of the God of love, and walk with gladness and confidence into that, so that we prepare for peace and no longer for war. Amen.